After studying this module, you will be able to know about the implications of criminal profiling, the objectives and forms of criminal profiling, and the approach in criminal profiling. Criminal profiling consists of the interpretation of criminal characteristics. There are more than a few techniques to make these conclusions, though not always with a high point of consistency. Forensic criminologists or profilers can predict the criminal characteristics based on the statistical model, former research, or experience. They can be used to hard the physical evidence to make presumptions about the physical characteristics, or they can use the analytical logic, critical philosophy, and the scientific method to make interpretation about the criminal interpersonal and psychological physiognomies based on the examination of the crime scene behavior. Criminal profiling has efficacy during criminal investigations if it can dependably express and decrease the ambiguous pool. Criminal profiling and interrelated methods were established as implements to be used in the inspective course to assist in the identification of suspects. There are also a number of advantageous forensic supports that they can function that are not certainly related to establishing the criminal identity. These take account of focusing the suspect pool, elucidating behavioral evidence, case connection, and supporting in the development of the investigative strategies. There is something further to be said for the potential use of criminal profiles as a factor to assist in enlightening the user of fact as to the wide-ranging category of criminal and may be accountable for a specific offense. Criminal profiles may be a rational support to the experimenter of fact, pre-arranged in two very essential stipulations. First, the court of law must comprehend and be categorical in its decisions or directions to the adjudicators about the limits of behavioral substantiation. Secondly, criminal profilers must not ignore these limits and interfere on the subject of culpability by giving opinions as to whether or not the accused fits in a specific profile. Criminal profiling is a practice that has seen increasing popular and media attention over the past several decades. Although the practice of criminal profiling has been recognized for centuries in various forms, the term criminal profiling was first placed into regular use by forensic analysts. They used it to refer to the practice of making conclusions about criminals' characteristics from their activities during a crime. In its most rudimentary form, criminal profiling is an investigative tool that distinguishes criminal characteristics from the crime scene and the behavior of the criminals. It is an inferential process that encompasses the investigation of criminal behavior, their dealings with the crime scene and the victim, and their adoptions during the crime. Now we will study about the objectives of criminal profiling. Regardless of the terminology used to define it or the tangible practices employed, All methods of profiling have similar purposes. During the course of its application across time, profiling has been intended to support the law enforcement to develop a practical suspect pool in unsolved crime, either by narrowing a wide list of suspects to a small and more convenient group, or by providing new ranges of inquiry. The first is the investigative phase, which consists of discriminating features of the unknown criminal for the known crime. It is this phase that will be the most affiliated to conventional concepts of profiling. In the investigative phase, there are 7 crucial objectives. First is assess the nature and significance of forensic and behavioral evidence to a certain crime or sequence of correlated crimes. Second, reduce the sustainable suspect pool in a criminal investigation. Third, arrange the investigation into remaining suspects. Fourth, link hypothetically related crimes by ascertaining crime scene indicators and behavior patterns, that is, modus operandi and signature of the crime. Then, evaluate the potential for intensification of annoyance of the criminal behavior to more grave or more vehement crimes. Make available investigators with investigatively appropriate indications and strategies. Support keeping the inclusive investigation on track and undistracted by posing new perceptions. The second phase is acknowledged as a trial phase, which involves providing of information about a crime or sequence of crimes for which there is an alleged criminal. A profile can be advantageous at this stage of an investigation because it can assist in developing suitable conversation and questioning tactics, among other things. Further, a profile may be used in court as expert evidence to contend for provoking conditions and the like, occasionally meaning the difference between life imprisonment and death penalty cases. Therefore, during the trial phase of an investigation, a profiler's objectives are to appraise the nature and value of forensic and behavioral evidence to a particular crime or series of related crimes, develop questioning or cross-examination approaches, support, develop understanding into criminal fictions and impulses, develop perception into criminal purpose and intent before, during and after the commission of crime. Link potentially related crimes by identifying crime scene indicators and behavior patterns, that is, modus operandi and signature. The objectives of profiling may also be dictated in part by the type of crime being profiled and by the requirements of the investigative team demanding assistance. Also, some crimes are more suited to profiling than others. Therefore, it is also necessary to consider the types of crimes that profiling might assist in and whether a case involves the use of anything that may be exclusive and time-consuming implementation. Generally, it is noted that profiling is most suited to crimes involving psychopathology or where there is some evidence of psychological dysfunction, or in the crimes of sexual nature because they involve more interaction between the criminal and the victim. Such crimes classically involve murder, rape, arson and bombing, but may also include anonymous letter writing and other crimes of an unusual, weird, violent, sexual and repetitive in nature. Next is the pattern of criminal profiling. To effectively complete a profile in a given case, a range of information may be necessary, depending on the technique used. This ranges from statistical data about the earlier crimes to physical evidence and witness statements to the reconstruction and interpretation of the criminal behavior. Apparently, the more thorough this information is, the more precise the profiling conclusions can be. If the information is incomplete or incorrect, depending on the profiling method used, certain characteristics may be impossible to conclude, or at the very least, it may utterly weaken the reliability of the conclusions found. Therefore, it is by and large factual that more information is better. For example, the first stage is profiling inputs and describes those elements necessary to gather the calculation. These elements include a complete summation of the crime, location, weather conditions, and complete victim information, including those of the domestic background, the employment, reputation, and criminal history. Forensic information pertinent to the crime is also necessary. Autopsy reports, photographs and toxicology, as well as crime scene photographs of the area and the crime scene sketches helps to provide a complete depiction. However, it may not be said that a limited amount of evidence will produce a limited profile in every case. Some profilers show limitation with the information or outputs they provide in their profiles, whereas others are substantially more copious in their assessments. This broad-mindedness is typical of inductive methods, which emphasize more on offense simplifications and not certainly on the available evidence, resulting in a comprehensive range of accessible characteristics. Next is the methodology of criminal profiling. Turvey argues that in most cases during the investigative phase, only about 4 relevant offender characteristics can be actually deducted or concluded from the crime scene behavior. These are the criminal skill, knowledge of victim, knowledge of the crime scene, and knowledge of methods and materials. With other characteristics are potentially inferable, they are considered less relevant to investigative needs by virtue of failing to narrow down the suspect pool or inadequate to differentiate from the general public, thus not permitting the new avenues of inquiry to be proposed. However, it was noted that although only 4 characteristics are relevant in determining a suspect after the person is located during the trial phase, there will be supplementary questions of forensic interest regarding the crime scene and criminal that may be of further value to the court. At the other end of the spectrum is Gibbard, who provides an exhaustive list of those things that are believed or can be determined from the crime, including name, age, gender, race, height and weight, marital status, children, ages and sex, wife, pregnant and recent birth, education level, socio-economic status, history of and type of sexual problems, physical abnormalities and or defects such as acne, speech impediment, obese, walk with a limp, etc., residence, condition of living, etc., automobile, condition of transport, etc., behavior including any visible change recently undescribed, mannerisms and personality, employment recently laid off, skills associated with job, day or night person, users of drugs or alcohol, recent increase, dress sloppy or neat, type of clothing, known to carry, collect or display weapons or what type, and rigid versus flexible personality. This list is consistent with other inferable criminal traits and emotional states covering almost every aspect of their past, present and future. It should be noted, however, that the means of deducing these broader and less investigatively relevant mannerisms is typically through comparison to previous criminals who committed similar crimes and not through a process of case-based deductions. Now, about the paradigms of criminal profiling. First is the inductive criminal profiling. An inductive argument provides a conclusion that is made likely or a matter of probability by posing subsidiary argumentation. In profiling, this support over and over again includes things like physical and behavioral evidence, research outcomes, or even profiler skill and proficiency. A good inductive argument will provide strong support for the conclusion offered, but this still does not make the argument inevitably accurate. In actuality, even the best inductive argument is a generalization hypothesis and a philosophy anticipating substantiation through analysis. A crucial identifying feature of inductive profiles is the use of qualifiers such as probably, maybe or typically, among others, stressing the probabilistic nature of the assessment. Apart from perspective, two of the issues which may seriously affect on the generalizability of any statistical data used to generate the inductive theories are sample size and the research methodology. Then comes the deductive criminal profiling. Deductive profiling depends on a more scientific and organized progressions whereby criminal physiognomies are a direct extension of the available physical and behavioral evidence. If the principles are true, then the conclusions must also be true, because a deductive argument is structured so that the conclusion is discretely contained within the proposition, and unless the reasoning is invalid, the conclusion follows as a matter of course. A deductive argument is designed so that it takes us from truth to truth. In profiling, deduction draws on the scientific methods, which is a logical step-by-step procedure involving observations and experimentation in problem solving. Unlike induction, the deduction takes the possible hypotheses gathered from statistics and research and tests them against the physical evidence present in each case. This is in conjunction with the view not to prove the hypothesis but rather to disprove it. That is, each possible characteristic of the criminal is established against the evidence with the objective of altering it or attesting it to be fallacious. Criminal profiling consists of the interpretation of criminal characteristics. There are more than a few techniques to make these conclusions, though not always with a high point of consistency. The term criminal profiling was first placed into regular use by the forensic analysts. They used it to refer it to the practice of making conclusions about criminals' characteristics from their activities during a crime. The objectives of profiling may also be dictated in part by the type of crime being profiled and by the requirements of the investigative team demanding assistance. Also, some crimes are more suited to profiling than others. From an analysis of the case inputs, theories are formed inductively and tested against the evidence. After numerous and repeated attempts to disprove the theories, a deductive conclusion can be put forth. New physical evidence may be incorporated into the decision-making process to update the conclusion. Also, new advances in science and understanding may challenge the long-held assumptions and question the current hypothesis. Although it may appear as such, this is not a problem with the process because the deduction can operate only within the realm of established laws and principles. To effectively complete a profile in a given case, a range of information may be necessary and required depending on the technique used or employed. This ranges from the statistical data about earlier crimes to physical evidences and witness statements to the reconstruction and interpretation of the criminal behavior.